seeing the slave castles and seeing where we came from, is you can't tell me anything about my level of resilience. You can't tell me anything about my value. You can't tell me anything that I'm not a queen. You can't tell me anything coming out of that experience. And a lot of times people don't have that experience. And I know if I take people of color, if I take Black people, if I take, these artists and these athletes to the continent to see what I saw, you come back activated in a different way.
This is the Changeup. I'm Keith Hernandez, and today we welcome Alexys Feaster. Alexys is the founder and CEO of the Kinship Advisors and a certified life coach. The Kinship Advisors creates alliances within the sports and entertainment world, those who are committed to personal development, social justice, strategic business expansion, and sustaining impact in underserved communities. We talked about the formation of her company, her time as the director of player development for the NBA, and the social justice movement that took off in the NBA's bubble. All right, super excited about the guest today. Today we have the founder and CEO of the Kinship Advisors, Alexys Feaster. Alexys, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Keith. I'm excited to be here.
You have an amazing background, and I want to get into all of the stuff that you did with the NBA and with the Obama administration. But I really want to start with first the Kinship Advisors and what it is. Can you give us a quick description on what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Kinship Advisors is a strategic advisory firm where I work with athletes, entertainers, and just folks that have influence around how to really get out there as it relates to social impact. So we saw everybody's interest post George Floyd, but we saw that there was also a void in people knowing exactly how to activate and exactly what to do. And our firm does just that. We work really closely with you, your family, your community to try to really see how we can make real change in this world collectively. Our other specialty is around Black culture. So we work really closely again with agencies, teams, players to ensure that what their athletes or artists are doing are really connected back to who they are as people. So we're like experts in authenticity. So how can we help to really activate in that space? And we're all about connecting, elevating, building, and transforming. So that's what we do.
Amazing. Thank you. Could you give a specific example? I know you're working with Drew and Lauren Holiday and their foundation. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you do specifically with some of the athletes?
Absolutely. So Drew and Lauren Holiday, Drew is our new NBA champion of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Gold medalist, NBA
yes,
champion.
All the things. Go straight from winning the gold to Tokyo. I mean, the work ethic, I tell you, just amazing person.
And Lauren's no slouch either, right? She has 2 gold medals, I think.
Yeah, a 2-time gold medalist. I mean, imagine being their kids. Both of your parents are Olympic gold medalists. It's amazing. But I work really closely with them. So what I do is I manage their $5.5 million social impact fund. And, they are great people who want to give money back, resources back into communities that need it the most. And so a couple of weeks ago, deployed $1 million out of that fund to 25 Black-owned businesses and 25 Black-owned or Black-led organizations.
Wow.
But it's not just, we don't end there. So, Kinship, again, is not just about doing things on the surface. So we now have also brought in coaches. We have partner and fund Black founders who's going to do crowdfunding campaign to ensure that those businesses are raising money outside of what Drew and Lauren are doing. And that's just scratching the surface. That's just them actually giving away capital into the community. But it's also deeper into their partnerships, holding their partners accountable and how to really show up in communities in need in a way that represents who they are as people. And that's what's so cool about the work, right? I work with Ben Simmons. I work with Just Women's Sports. I work with Metro Esports. They are a company out of Philly specializing in diversifying the gaming industry. So they're building the first ever multicultural gaming league. So cool. That's just a couple examples of our clients and the work that we're doing.
Do you think there's something different about this generation of athletes and entertainers and, I guess celebrities, influencers, that they just get and understand giving back and the community roots more than generations in the past? Or is it just different access to different tools that is allowing them to do it?
Yeah, I think it's been around for a long time, right? Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we can go down the names of basketball players and other athletes that have done this work. I think now, after last year, people have just felt more compelled to do something. And so, Carmelo, LeBron, we can go down the list of amazing athletes that have been doing this work. But something happened last year. There was a shift. I know I felt it. I'm sure you felt it.
Absolutely.
I think the responsibility felt more weighty, especially for Black athletes. So if I'm going to go out and dribble this ball, what else am I going to do to show that my life matters, right? Because that could have been them. And I think that connectivity, that relatability, especially in the sport of basketball, really hit home. And then also so many people were being murdered in cities right outside of, arena gates.
Yeah.
People really felt that responsibility. So I think people are a little bit more activated. Again, what I also saw, especially in the bubble during that time, is that people did not know what to do. And none of us know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Like racism is not going away tomorrow, right? But
Yeah.
what you can do is you can take collective action. And I think that now that's what you're seeing more of is people are kind of trying to figure out how to get together to take collective action.
So you were in the bubble during the run up to the NBA finals. And I think that was one of the first times, well, we've seen it a little bit with Instagram and Twitter. We get the real personalities of the NBA players. But for a lot of fans, that was the first time that they kind of fully understood that these players have families, they have significant others, they have children, and they have lives outside of the 2.5 hours that they're on the court. What was that experience like, having everybody in there, and what were some of the conversations that came out of it? Because we're seeing this impact still from that bubble period.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, all kudos go to the players and the team, staff, and all the folks that sequester their life in that space to get the season done, right? Like that level of sacrifice, as you mentioned, to be away from your families, to not be able to get in your car and go anywhere, to not be able to march and protest, right? So to take athletes like Jaylen Brown, who were on the streets protesting a few weeks earlier, and now say you can't leave this space, right, to express yourself and to show support and solidarity for your community. Mentally, that's very difficult, as you can imagine. And
Absolutely.
I'd say, for me, it was something that really surprised me. I was surprised by the level of weight that it had on my mental. I brought my yoga mat and my Bible and all my books, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to go in the bubble, and it's going to be
we're going to, fit and ready to go.
We're going to come out fit. We're going to come out like Zen. We're going to come out with these plans for what we're going to do in our communities. We're going to register voters." I had all this stuff, and you get there, and you're like, "Man, this is heavy.
Yeah,
this is heavy." And so that's what it felt like. It felt weighty. It felt like I was with athletes that were not just the best athletes in the world, but the most impressive as men, right? To see them show up on the court, and then after being on the court, go into, there was this little restaurant that was in the middle of the bubble that we all ate at, and everybody's in there talking about, what do we do next, right? Those were the conversations.
Yeah.
I always tell the story of even, the Kyle Korvers, who is so, such an amazing ally and so really engaged around being educated around these issues, asking, his Black teammates and having these conversations around what we could do differently and do better. I have not witnessed that level of discussion all throughout all the days and the way that happened in the NBA bubble. And it was really incredible to be able to be there witnessing and being a part of those discussions.
Yeah, it became a forcing function to have these conversations that probably should have been had 10, 15, 20 years ago in the league, right? Were there points of contention? Was there disagreement on how it should be handled and what should be done?
Yeah, I think in general, racism, discrimination, how much you put your influence out there to make a change is so personal. So I think naturally people would look around and say, well, what is this person doing? Shouldn't they be the person speaking up? And that's a hard place to be, right? And I think to me that's what you saw a little bit more of is, who is the person that's supposed to be speaking up? Who is the leader that's going to lead in these different spaces? But I think that's also difficult, right? Like to put all of that weight on one man or on a few men is not fair. I always think about Brianna, where she says, I didn't become Brianna to be like this role model. Like I'm not trying to be that, right? But there are different levels of what people think folks should be willing to sacrifice. To me, I think that that's just a normal thing that happens. But that conversation, the discussion is what made things change. And so one of the things that I did during this time was I hosted these conversations with people like Breonna Taylor's mother.
Oh, wow.
Once you hear from Breonna Taylor's mother, you're activated, right? So like you can see, and for me, like I knew the types of folks to bring into the conversations to help just, if you're right there on the cusp of being an activist or an advocate, we bring in certain people to have conversations that can maybe help those players or help those people go to the next level, because they're right there. They've got the empathy. They just need to be activated around the real stories. And we did a lot of that. And I think that was super powerful.
So what was something that Breonna Taylor's mother would say? I think there was this shift that we saw of athletes who understand the injustice was going on and then getting more specific about who it was and what was going on. Was there something like that she brought to the table that was eye-opening for the players?
Yeah, that was very intentional. So what you're referencing, literally the next day after the conversation she had, you saw the players knowing the names of the police officers. They were name dropping. They're going into the media and they're like, this guy, that guy, like they were being so intentional. And that was the conversation that we had. And like I said, I hosted that conversation, interviewed both Breonna Taylor's mom and Tamika Mallory.
Oh, wow.
And Tamika Mallory, of course, has been at the forefront of this fight for justice for Breonna Taylor. And, the question that I posed to them was, what do they need to do? How can these men of influence, of power, who care, who have Black mothers and sisters, and, are watching the story, what can they do? And they want to keep Breonna's name in people's minds, but they also want to know the names of the people that should be held accountable. And that makes a difference. Just
Absolutely.
saying justice is so broad. We need to arrest these officers. These are their names. This is what's happening. This is the district attorney, and so they were able to really be very vocal in saying who the people are that are responsible. And that was a game changer because
Yeah.
oftentimes you hear athletes speak around these issues and it's vague, Black Lives Matter, let's end police brutality. But once you hit home and you're being very specific around the intentions and what needs to happen, it's a game changer.
Absolutely. And, so many friends who are part of this movement are the I don't want to be a hashtag,
Right.
where it's such a tough thing to kind of digest and understand of for so many in this country, if your name becomes a hashtag, it means that you've been murdered
Right.
and how difficult and how hard that is. There was also the Milwaukee Bucks walkout during this time. And it feels like there was a lot of steps that were coming that led to this. But obviously you were there. Walk me through what was happening. And you worked pretty closely with Drew Holiday, but he wasn't on the Bucks yet, right?
No.
He was on the Pelicans. So yeah. But walk me through like some of the conversations that went into, we're not going to play today. This is enough.
Right. Now, when I tell you, Keith, it's actually a funny story. So I was still in quarantine when this happened. So I
Okay.
had come in town and I had 2 days left, I believe it was, on quarantine. And I started to see what was happening and percolating on the TV. But then also some of the guys were starting to text me and call me and say, hey, we're trying to figure out what to do here. We're a little torn. We don't know who's supposed to lead by walking out because, OKC was playing after. There was a bunch of different games that were happening. And I panicked. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I started to frantically call everyone that I knew. I called Van Jones. I'm calling Tamika. I'm calling all these different people. I'm calling all of my political network to get advice. But then I also called the league and said, I've been on this ride, this journey with these guys this whole time, and I'm in quarantine, and I can't stay in quarantine. Like, let's follow all the rules. And it wasn't just quarantine. You had to have a certain amount of tests. I was like 2 tests short of the window I needed. And I said,
and they were doing tests like daily.
Oh, yeah, I tested daily, sometimes, more. And at that time, there were certain tests that you had to pass, and I had 2 more that I needed to pass. So it wasn't about the days necessarily; it was about the testing. I called people and said, "Look, I can't be here in this room and not be there supporting them. It feels wrong. They're calling me; they need me." And luckily, I was able to clear all medical protocols and do all the testing that I needed to get done to get out the next day. But when they were in the locker room, a player from the Bucks called me in the locker room, said, "Hey, like, what do we do?" And I said, "I'm watching you on TV and you're calling me. I don't know. Like, give me a heads up next time." That was first of all. Like, give me a bigger heads up would be great so I could figure this out. They're like, "Can we reach Obama?" I'm like, "No, I don't know." Like, so like that's actually literally what was happening in the moment is, frantically like, "You want me to find Obama for you? Okay, in 5 minutes." But it was literally all of that. Like, they were trying to make sure that they weren't just walking off the court to make a statement. They wanted to really do something that took it a step beyond. And that team did that, right? They were talking, they had the
Absolutely.
team owner connecting with different people. And I think it all worked out for the best because then after that, all the other teams and leagues and people started to follow suit. They were trailblazers.
They absolutely were. Outside of, I would say, March 11th, which I do want to talk to you because I think was a day for all of us that started to make us realize what coronavirus was and the impact it's going to have. But that day where the Bucks walked out really shook the entire sports world. And I think the whole culture that this is bigger than basketball. This is bigger than entertainment. This is real and we need to talk about it.
Right.
Were there any conversations about missed opportunities or things that the players said that retrospect, looking back now that they don't have, I hate to call it the fortunate situation of being in a bubble, but they did have that time period together. Are there missed opportunities that they look back on and say, man, I wish we were able to push more here or kind of pivot this way with some of the stuff that we did?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say to me, it was more individualized for the missed opportunities where guys were expressing to me that they felt like they weren't doing their part. So there was guilt.
Yeah.
Right. And so imagine again, being young Black men and feeling guilt for not doing more, not just the collective as the league, but as a man. Right.
Yeah.
So that to me was the level of missed opportunity that I would hear over and over again, to no one's fault necessarily. Right. So is it the league's opportunity to provide individualized support so that they can do more? Was it the union? Was it the team? Is it their agent? There's a lot of different people that are supporting these athletes. But the reality is that this is different. It's so personal.
Yeah.
It's so deep. It's like, you saw Jaylen Brown post the other day a picture with him and Obama. It wasn't just for a photo op, right? Like these guys want
Yeah.
to have deep conversations. They just don't know where to go necessarily. They don't know how to get to them, and they don't know what to do afterwards. So to me, I felt guilt because, I worked for the league and we did a great voter registration drive where we increased voter registration from 22% to 96%.
Amazing. That blows me away.
I had to drug my sign everywhere, my voter registration sign to get people to register.
I do want to find out who those 4% are,
Right,
but
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah, I would literally have them highlighted in yellow, like
You know
yes.
who they
Oh yeah,
are.
I kept the spreadsheet. I literally saw them all, but that to me was more impactful is that they felt like they had missed opportunities as people, and that's why I started the kinship. Honestly,
So what would you tell them about those missed opportunities? That there's still a timeline in front of us? What kind of advice would you give them and others who look at this movement and say, I wish I could have marched, or, I didn't live in a city, so I couldn't do as much as others. And I'm putting a sign up in my front yard, but is that enough? What would you tell them?
no, it's a great question. It's do more, right?
Yeah.
Like I look at like Ben Simmons has this great campaign called Do More. Whatever it is that you're doing, and if you feel like you're not doing enough, do more, right? And I love that concept because it could be really personal. You have the sign in your yard, you feel like that's not enough. Go to your community center and talk to your community organizers. It's not that big of a lift, right? You're an athlete and you're just posting on social and it feels inauthentic and you want to do more, right? Activate your team, talk to people like us, like figure out what that looks like. What's the bigger picture here? So I say that to all of us. We can all do a little bit more and I could do more. One of the things that I struggled with is you get busy as an entrepreneur. I was damn sure, excuse my, I was definitely busy at the NBA. And I remember being like, okay, I'm so busy with my job and I'm not volunteering anymore.
Yeah.
I need to do more. Like
Yeah.
I used to love to volunteer. Volunteering filled up my spirit. It did something for me that I always tell stories about. Ever since I was a young kid, I volunteered at the Covenant House and all these different places. It made me who I am today. And I'm not even spending any time doing that because of my work obligations. I need to do more. And so I just feel like that's what I would tell anybody is that there's always a next step above, especially if it's on your heart and on your
Yeah.
spirit. Yeah, I think that's important.
I love that so much. You've also talked about small wins, which I love because in my career as a salesperson, sales manager, I would always make the joke of be like Ichiro, hit singles and doubles, don't worry about the home runs all the
Yeah.
time. And my managers hated when I said that because they wanted us to sell more. But when I was coaching people, I would always say, get the little singles and doubles, they'll build your confidence to move. Talk to me about small wins and how you coach people on the small wins because
Yeah.
I vibed with that right away when I saw that.
No, absolutely. And I think oftentimes we're moving so quickly, we're not even stopping
Yeah.
to absorb the small wins, right? So I think it's twofold. That's one is we all have small wins all day, every day.
Yeah.
Like if you accomplish whatever your big goal was of the day, that's a small win that oftentimes gets derailed because we're overwhelmed in life. So I think that's the first thing is stopping and pausing and recognizing that you are doing small wins every day so that you're not, self-deprecating. I think so many of us go down this rabbit hole of, oh, I should have got this done today. I should have done that. Yeah, you might need to be more organized, but if you got some things done, right, like you need to understand that. Then I think from the business standpoint, from the client standpoint, from the work that we do, you have to look at how the small wins add up to something big. Like I'm a big picture girl. So even with what we're doing with Drew,
Yeah.
I'm like, we can do all these things and have this coalition of athletes all across sport, right? Because at the end of the day, Lauren's a soccer player, Drew's a basketball player. He's doing tried and tested work that we're all watching, right? Like he's doing things that,
Yeah.
that you're not seeing. I know a lot of other people are doing really great things. He wants to do great things together with other athletes and other people of influence. That to me is like the big win, right? Is how you take these small steps with individual people and say, what does our collective look like?
Yeah.
Our collective is stronger and is more powerful with more bodies, right? It's more powerful with more people of power. And we don't see that happening enough.
Absolutely.
I love what Carmelo and Dwayne Wade and that crew did with, the social change fund. Like that's a collective of three guys that are doing great things. Chris Paul.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think more of that needs to happen across sports. So those are the bigger wins. But on your day to day, like what is that one thing that if you get this done today, what is that one thing for your client that if you get that one thing done that you're going to make a difference, you're going to make a change, you're going to create a better situation for someone and understand that those things matter, right? Those things add up. So I'm all about small wins. I talked to my team earlier and I'm like, look, guys, let's go through this whole task list and they had a lot of small wins. We had a lot of big projects, but today
Right.
was a good day of a lot of good small wins.
It's such good advice. And I think more people need to follow that, keep the positivity going in their day. So, with your experience at the NBA, obviously you had close contact with a lot of the players. How did you build the trust? For a lot of professional athletes and entertainers, they have their crew, right? They have the people that they grew up with, that they knew from their teenage life, that they kind of bring up with them. It's worked out really well for some of those folks, especially on LeBron's camp. How are you able to kind of build the trust with them to say, hey, I'm here to support and grow your career?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's the currency that you can't put a price to, right? The relationship.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I started doing this when I was young. So I'm about to be 40 in October. It's coming up.
Me too. I'm turning 40 on Sunday, or no,
Oh
Saturday.
yes.
Yikes, Saturday.
Happy almost
Even sooner.
birthday.
Yeah,
Big
thank you.
milestones here, Keith. We're getting there.
Yeah.
So, it's I've been doing this even back in the day. So I remember when I was 18 and I was, grew up in Berry Farms in Washington, DC, and I was volunteering on political campaigns, and I was able to get the trust of the mayor to where he asked me to babysit his children, right? Like
Oh,
I became
cool.
like the babysitter to like the council people and
So
so it's like it's
let's
great.
unpack that a little bit. Like, how did you get that trust?
No,
That's a quick
it's
come up, real
right,
quick.
exactly. It's authenticity, right? It's
Yeah.
literally, looking people in the eye, having thoughtful conversations, wanting to go deeper, right? Like I've
Yep.
always been a person that, I'm not probing like tell me your whole life story, but I want to have a deeper connection with people. Sometimes I've had to learn, my dad used to say, you need to make sure to protect your spirit and your energy because you're having deep conversations with
Mm.
everybody and that can be very draining.
Yeah.
I've been told that I attract people, so like I had to figure out how to create boundaries around that as well. But now I think I figured out the secret sauce, right? Like I know my boundaries. I know that at the end of the day, everybody's not going to be super close in your network. We all have favorites. We all have people that we like to spend more time with.
Yep.
But the reality is that I'm the same with every single person. I'm the same with whoever it is on the street to a rookie coming in. The thing that I'm very vocal about is people switching up. Also, like a rookie comes in and they're this great humble guy, and 4 years later they're getting their super max and they don't pick up the phone, right? It's like, hold up. I like to call
You
people
forgot
out on
about.
things like
Yeah.
that. Like how so the money changed you? That's how you do it? Like that's how you
Yeah.
rolling, these days. So I think there's something about being honest and upfront. I'm not afraid to have difficult
Cool.
conversations, but also I think something that I think is really important that people don't talk about enough is that in the Black culture, we're a culture that's built on family. Like I
Yeah.
literally named my company Kinship because it means family.
Yeah.
And these athletes are close to their families and oftentimes come in and there's all of these outside, factors that come into play that can really diminish and harm the family unit. And so for me, I've always been very intentional about getting to know your mom, getting to know your wife, your
Smart.
girlfriend, your kids from an authentic standpoint because if your mom has the tools that we're giving you, then she's not harassing you about stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's getting the knowledge together. And I think
Very smart.
oftentimes people don't want to educate the Black family unit, especially in sport. People want to divide. Not everybody, not everybody at all. But I think part of that and the fact that I've been very intentional about being, having building relationships with the whole person, I think has helped me to build trust because that's how I want people to treat me and my family.
That's amazing. So, how did you know, or when was the turning point for you that your talent, your skill, that you've been working with the NBA over half a decade, was ready to take this leap and start your own thing? Was this always an idea? Was this always a kernel in the back of your head, or was this something that sprung out in the past year?
Yeah, so in 2019, I registered the name The Kinship because
Okay.
it kept coming to me, right? I was like, I want to
Yeah.
build this community of people where it feels like family, but we are disruptive. We have different business opportunities that other people aren't doing. We're showing up differently in the community. So I had this idea that I knew I wanted to build something. I didn't know exactly what it would look like, but I knew I liked the name. And then, NBA life is busy. I had a 5-year plan of spending 5 years as on my vision board. If I could do 5 years, at this place, this would be
Yeah.
amazing. And, it's just like any other job, right? Like the NBA is the most progressive league doing all these amazing things, but there's a ceiling. I think it's changing, but there's a ceiling for Black people. There's a ceiling for Black women. Like I'm the double negative, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing that like how can I grow or how much can I blossom in these different spaces And what was that doing to my own psyche? And I'll tell this story. I started to go see a therapist to talk specifically about my fear. And
Yeah.
I said, I know that I'm meant to do more. What is holding me back, right? Like, why am I so scared to take the lead? Why am I scared to at least try whatever this is? Again, I didn't know exactly what it would be. And I remember she was like, is this what you're coming to therapy for? I'm like, I'm sure I've got family issues too, and mama issues, daddy. I'm sure I got a lot of issues.
We'll get to those.
We'll get to those. But I want to talk about why is it that I talk to athletes and I coach, executives, and I help them be their best self. And I know for sure I'm not living in my genius zone, for
Oh,
sure.
interesting. Yeah.
And I can't sleep at night. And she helped me build up the confidence, which is weird to say. Like, I thought I was confident, but the reality is I was so scared of if I would be able to pay my bills, if people would hire me, right? Like, you're attached to the NBA, you're attached to Obama. I was attached to Interscope Records, attached to all these different things. Like, was I enough, right? And I think oftentimes entrepreneurs struggle with that.
Yeah.
Are you enough? And, I got to the point I go into the bubble and talked to a couple of guys and said, look, I'm struggling a little bit. Like, I know y'all are struggling too, but let's talk about me for a second. I'm also struggling, right? Like, I need advice. Can you coach me? And I sat down with a few guys and asked them to coach me through my thinking process around this. And every
Very
single
cool.
person said, we've been wondering why you still work there.
Huh. Okay.
Like, oh, that you've been wondering? Okay, cool. So that's, that validation, a bunch of other factors happened at play that just made me think like, okay, am I going to go to another job, another place, or do I try to, take my shot at entrepreneurship in a way that was different than I did in my 20s, which is a little not as organized. And in January, I sent out the email to my peers and to folks that I know love and support me and said, this is what I'm doing. Support me.
Yeah.
Like, let's figure this out.
So cool.
And luckily it worked.
I've talked to a few different people about when they started their new company, and I'm surprised the amount of cold call for the first client. I got to imagine yours came from your network. Can you share with me the first client or maybe the first couple of clients and how you were able to secure those, kind of really get the company off the ground?
Right. No, that's a great question. I tell everyone the cold call is the king.
Yeah.
For me too.
Yeah.
The cold call is the way to go. And I think this goes across a bunch of different cultures, but I know for me and for folks that I know, the people that you know the closest are never your first client.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing. Like, you'll go back to like all your best friends and, your mentors and your sponsors. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, let us know who your first client is. I'm like, it's supposed to be you.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? Like, you're supposed to be the person investing in me. So I think a lot of us, I for sure had that experience where, like, man, how is this going to work? I was being coached that whole first month. I had such great friends because I was like crying on the phone. I'm like, what did I do? All the people that I'm close with, maybe they don't need me right now. Maybe they don't need this service right now. Maybe I picked the wrong thing. And the reality is I had a player that I loved who were very, very close. And we had started a relationship. He's like, yes, let's work on these different things. And, so he was the first person that was like, I believe in you. And it's funny because it was a young guy, right? But,
yeah,
the story that I think is the most poignant is I got a phone call from an agent, Jason Glushon, who, I'll name drop him because he's such an amazing person. He represents Drew and a lot of other guys. He's the one who reached out and said, Drew and Lauren are doing this really great work. No promises. I don't know how well you know them. I actually did not know them that well. So I look at this kind of like a
really?
cold call too, out of all the guys, I didn't know him as well. And we had a call with Lauren and later had calls with Drew and Lauren together. And when I tell you, you're talking about values aligned, mission aligned,
yeah,
I'm all about family. They're all about family. And so that was the first like big client from the sports space. But before then I started working with Bleecker around coaching. I was doing
cool.
a lot of coaching with people. And so, and again, though that was a cold introduction from one of my mentors. So that's how it happened. And then after it started to roll, then I started getting phone calls from agencies and getting phone calls from other folks like, man, you're doing something that's very niche. It's really cool. And I'm like, okay, you get it, right? What I'm doing is not competition to anyone. Oftentimes you deal with celebrities and artists and you might have the management or the agency like, oh, we don't want someone else getting close to our person.
Of course. Yeah.
And, what I try to do is build that trust. Like, I'm here to help you look good, right? So if I help the person that you're working with and they're using their influence for good, it helps your job, right? So now their reputation and the media is better. People want to sponsor them differently. They have opportunities in a more broad way. And now you're part of this network with the Kinship where, you're able to work across different athletes in different genres because you're a client of mine, right? So it's a different network and ecosystem that people are finding to be really beneficial. And I've got really big plans for what we're going to be doing in the future.
I love that so much, and I love the consistent outreach for support. I think especially as Latino and people of color tend to kind of hold that within and not
Mhm.
share in that struggle and that journey. But it sounds like that was very important to the formative months of the Kinship Advisors for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm very vocal. Like I said, like I will talk about like what is our responsibility. You don't owe me a responsibility to hire me, right?
Yeah,
But we owe each other a shot, right? Like, and I
absolutely.
think that at the end of the day, like that's what I always ask for even now. Like, give me a shot to pitch you, not pitch you because I want XYZ name on my roster. Because it's because I see something in you. And I've turned down clients already. And people have asked me, you're a new business. Don't you need the money? Of course, right?
Hmm.
But I also am building my business based on a very, very clear, consistent foundation of values, or else I'd be working back in the corporate world, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I would stay where I was if I wasn't trying to build a company based on family values. So if you're not willing to connect with us as people working with you, I don't want to work with people that can't get on the phone, that can't express what they like, what they love, what they care about. Why am I talking through a third party to get to what you care about, right? Like
yeah.
I don't work with people that have their plain telephone, right? We need to be able to have conversations around how we can make a difference together, or else it's not authentic. And that's what we do. I work with people that are all about elevation. So elevating others while they're elevating themselves. People that want to build something. I love the fact that everyone I'm working with is like, let's try some new stuff. Like, what,
Yeah.
what do you have? Who do you know? Like, what can we do? And I'm like, oh, that's my genius zone. I love innovating and I love being able to elevate. And then we're trying to transform, right? Like I look
Yeah.
at us as disruptors. Some things you'll see out in the open, some things you won't, because I think disrupting behind the scenes is very, very powerful. You don't want to show your hand on everything. And people who are down for that, people who are trying to figure out how we can move the needle in ways that are both public facing, but also, more stealth. Let's work together because the more the merrier that have these values, we can change the world. I really believe that we can help underrepresented people and underrepresented communities get the support that they need. And I think that we can do that by using influence for good.
So much there that I love. In particular, the saying no to clients that you don't necessarily think you'll vibe with. Because again, are you bootstrapped or funded?
No, I'm bootstrapping.
Bootstrap. Okay,
Yep.
same. And I think one of the things, I think some of the bad advice, and I'd love to hear from you some of the bad advice that you got. But one piece of bad advice I got was take every client you can. Don't worry about the money. Just say yes to everything. And that actually did not, that was like, I didn't do that because of the values thing, because I
Yeah.
didn't feel comfortable with a couple of the clients. And I think it was more clarifying for me and my company that I said no to those things than I've said yes to others. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that
Right.
and a little bit about some bad advice that you might have gotten early on that you can laugh at now that might have pissed you off at
Right.
the time, but you can laugh at now.
No, I love that. No, I think you're right. So same. So I'm bootstrapping, and
Yeah.
we're a service based business, right?
Same.
So it's
Yeah.
clients and contracts and things like that. Now I am trying to figure out how to not bootstrap, right? So I think like I think that people always say wait 2 or 3 years and figure out how to scale. I think Kinship is in a very unique sweet spot where we can scale more quickly. And I've got people that are constantly amazing, amazing people that are constantly coming and want to work with me. And I find that to be really flattering. People from leagues, people from all walks of life, agencies, like, hey, are you hiring? Like, I'm ready to make a leap. I like what you're doing. That feels good.
Cool.
But what that also tells me is that with help like that, I need a little bit of funding because I want to pay people their value.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important, right? Like we want to give people what they deserve.
For sure it
And
is.
so
Yeah.
that's for me why I think through this process of getting some funding. And I think there's really interesting ways to do that by having some founding partners that are athletes, entertainers, some of the people that I work with, because then you're helping to create this ecosystem. So that's what I'm thinking through now that I think is going to be really appealing to a lot of different folks that again share the same values because the collective of what we can do together is kinship. I call it kinship and kinfolk.
Yeah.
Like our
Yeah.
kinship and kinfolk community that we can build is super important. And I would say like the worst advice, I feel like it's like yours. Like people were telling me to take on clients, but then also people were telling me to just get help from wherever I can get help.
Yeah.
And I did that in the beginning. I was like, okay, I need interns, I need help. Like anyone who's asking me to help, they can all help. That was bad advice.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that. Luckily, I'm 7 months in, and I was able to pivot really quickly. But the reality is that if you're building a business and a culture, because I'm not just about the business, the people that I work with, every Friday I coach my staff.
Oh,
So
cool.
like this morning, they all
Nice.
get coached because I want people to be their best selves. I want people to live a purpose driven life. And the reality is I have a very unique culture. So you're coming here to get this culture also. In the beginning, when I just needed the help and I was just having people help, it was the biggest waste of time. There was no buy-in necessarily. And I'm wasting more time micromanaging those people, or because I think I can't get something done, I'm, asking a friend to be helpful and it doesn't work out, in the right ways because they don't really get it. And so I think that was advice that I took that I was able to, again, luckily pivot. And now when I'm bringing people on my team or consultants, or I just did a call for summer interns, and every conversation I had with them was, do you know what we do? Do you embody what this company does? If you don't care about these issues, it's a non-starter. Like,
Yeah.
talent aside, whatever your interests are aside, what the kinship is doing needs to matter to you so that you know that this is bigger than you. And so that now I just do that differently and I've gotten a much different result.
Yeah. You're getting the right people,
Yeah.
right? Like really quickly, somebody that doesn't want that is just going to be like, all right, no, I'm out.
Exactly. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I just wanted to meet so and so athlete." I'm
Yeah,
like, "What?"
exactly.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it
Like,
can't be that. Yeah, no, it cannot be that. So can we go back to March 11th? Because I do want to hit on that. Because again, here we are, 18 months later, still talking about it. But I remember that day pretty vividly. I was living in Brooklyn. My wife and kids and I were in a car driving upstate to our house. We have a little cottage in Woodstock, and my phone buzzed, and it was the news about Rudy Gobert and the NBA shutting down. I thought I was going to be up here in Woodstock for like 2 or 3 weeks, laying low. Fast forward 18 months, I'm still up here living full time. um, but I got to imagine you were there somewhere. I'd love to hear your story of where you were March 11th and when you heard that news,
yeah.
and then what did you do moving forward?
No, so March 11th, I was sitting at home. So that weekend before, I'd gone with Mark Tatum and a bunch of executives, and we went to the Black Enterprise Summit in Vegas. And we were all in Vegas,
Okay.
kind of heard about COVID, but like nobody was really, we weren't really doing anything, right? It
Yeah.
didn't seem like that big of a deal. So we're in Vegas, and I had to fly to LA. Was in the locker room with the guys from the Lakers for a meeting, and then on the 10th, I flew home. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the news and I'm like, okay, so I was just in the locker room with the Lakers because
Yeah.
behind the scenes, some Lakers had also tested positive.
Oh.
So I was just with
Oh,
them.
wow. Okay.
And then I got this email that said some of the speakers at Black Enterprise were COVID positive. I had just left from there. So personally, immediately I was like, okay, this is real now. All this stuff is happening. The league is shutting down. So I wanted to get tested, and luckily, I hadn't caught COVID or anything like that. But we were still planning for the next trip, right? We're like, okay,
Yeah.
then tomorrow I have to go to Philly. Like, I was on the road. I used to go on the road 3 weeks out of the month. But then I started to get the phone calls and we started to hold the staff meetings, and they were like, no, this is real. This is something we're gonna have to shut down. Personally, I made a couple phone calls because I felt like it was unfair to expose Rudy Gobert in that way. And nobody knew what was going to happen, but to watch CNN, and a good friend of mine, works on CNN and is
Yeah.
broadcast on CNN, and to see his face as like the face of COVID, that bothered me. So I activated some communications internally to say, like, we've got to protect these guys, because the fact that his face is the face of COVID, the very first face, if you remember, he was the first celebrity face attached to COVID.
Yeah.
And
It was.
I felt very, very strongly
Yeah.
we should protect our guys differently, and we stopped releasing names unless players wanted them to. It's too easy.
It's too easy to villainize, right? At that point, I remember him touching the microphones, and it's like, doesn't even, now we know what we know. So yeah, so that was an act. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but that
No.
was an active decision not to release any more names after that.
Yeah, that was an active decision, right? And it's, you don't know what you don't know. So no one did it in a malicious way. Like, no one knew better. It was just like, hey, this is what happened. But from a perspective of someone that's there to protect and advocate for guys, even though I'm on the league side, not on the union side,
Yeah.
I'm still a person, right? You're still watching something unfold. And I struggled with the decision that's in the email, right? Like, I felt like it wasn't my place necessarily to jump in there. But at the same time, it literally it boiled my blood that in that moment, this is now the face. And I didn't care if it was Rudy or anybody else. Like, we have to protect our guys and not make it just about, again, I don't think it was anything that was ill intended, but at the end of the day, I'm really proud that that correspondence made it to the places and the people that needed to make it to. And you
Absolutely.
stop seeing names unless a player disclosed themselves. And so that's something that to me around that time was also pivotal, is you're now protecting players' health rights in ways
Absolutely.
that I don't think people were thinking about. So that was something to me that was super important. And then, then we were shut down. And of course, like everything else, the league is at the forefront of those things, and
Yeah.
everyone shuts down, the world shuts down. And that's when my role there at the league changed. Not too far after that, is I became one of the people that then started to advise, Adam Silver and the league internally on how to operate in this space, especially with the racial injustices that were happening during COVID. So it really shifted a lot of the work that I did internally after that as well.
It's so wild because there's COVID, there's the racial injustice and social movement.
Yeah.
It feels like there were so many important issues that became urgent.
Yeah.
And so, how did you handle that? And now you're sitting there, and you have the NBA commissioner turning to you, going, "What do we do?"
Yeah.
How do you handle that? These newfound responsibilities.
Yeah, it was a lot. And it wasn't just me, it was a coalition of Black employees from our Black Employee Resource Group. It was called Dream in Color. So
Cool.
I was one of the, I was the social responsibility and player programs ambassador, champion for this group. So I've got the players that don't want to play, that are like, this is a health issue. Then why are we playing? And then on top of it being a health issue, if this is a racial, that now we've got all these other layers of things happening. And so we got together, and it was, a group of 10 or 12 of us that would meet and try to come up with ideas and solutions. And, luckily we were able to get that in front of Adam multiple times. Like we had monthly meetings where we would present to him what we think should be happening internally, externally, and as it relates to players. It was extremely stressful, as you can imagine, because
Yeah.
we were also Black employees dealing with all of the things at the same time. So we found comfort in each other, literally on the phone till 2 o'clock in the morning, multiple times a week, trying to come up with plans and suggestions and give each other self-care in a way. Like,
Yeah. Wow.
how can we help to support and comfort each other? It was a very, very difficult time for everyone, but definitely that group, because we then had to, activate for the league across the country. So that's when I started hosting town halls with Dan Jones and started hosting these conversations,
Yeah.
because you're trying to open up the dialogue for everyone to be able to show how they feel, and at the same time not make it so that people of color are the people that are constantly talking about our experience. Like, we're living the experience.
Yeah.
We need other people to talk about how to be better allies. And so just, it was a very emotionally charged, emotionally draining situation, but we're all better for it, right? Like, things
Absolutely.
happen that move the needle. And that's the sacrifice that you make when you're in those positions of influence and power.
From the outside looking in, Adam Silver seemed really responsive and receptive to what you were sharing.
Yeah.
Did it feel that way for you?
Yeah, it did. It did. So, and I think there's levels to it, right? So, we're like, we want this, or this is what people really want to see. And it's like, okay, let's do some Black Lives Matter on the court, right? So, at the end of the day, I think that he did and they did, what they felt like was in their power to do. And at times, I think, from a humanity standpoint, we want to be, as people, as employees, we want to see our house be clean internally too. And so that was something that I think is going to take more time. And I think it's actually started to work now. But in the moment, we're like, and we're not getting equal pay, and we're not doing this. And like, so now there's
Right.
all these racial disparities that we're trying to uncover. And obviously those things take time to shift and fix. But for us, we couldn't, let our foot off the gas, because now's the time to bring to the forefront things that we would be scared to talk about, right? Like, we live in fear as employees in general, but definitely as employees of color, because you don't want to say, like, woe is me, like, why don't I have these considerations or these different situations? But it
Yeah.
felt okay. And I think that was the shift for all of us, is that it felt okay to talk to the white commissioner about how we feel as Black women. Who would have thought that
Yeah.
I'd be sitting here being like, as a Black woman, this is how I feel.
Right.
So that was a beautiful experience for him to sit there and listen and receive what we had to say.
That's amazing. And the next phase of that is the vaccines. So, fast forward 12 months. And once again, I think the NBA was at the front end, NBA, WNBA, of players don't have to share. And, this common refrain right now in the NFL and the MLB is, it's my personal choice, I'm not going to share it with you, which we pretty much know what that means.
Yeah.
But there are NBA players, A, who just came out and shared them getting the shot. B, there's some I'm forgetting who it was, but near tears of getting the shot and fear of the needle and working through that. Were you part of those conversations, publicly making the statement that some of these NBA players are getting vaccination?
Yeah. So I was on the tail end of that, or the early
Okay.
stages, because I left in November. But it was a conversation in general, because what is the responsibility of these men to be on TV
Yeah.
and take the vaccine, right? And that's always something that that we talked about with the guys is you don't have to be the face of the vaccine. Again, like
Yeah.
the leagues, teams, everybody, wants people to use their influence in that way to show America that this is safe. But at the same time, there shouldn't be any pressure for anyone. So that was what we would talk about often is, after the Tuskegee that experiment and like all these
Yeah.
different things that happen, you're asking Black men to be injected in something that no one knows. And I'm specifying Black men only because we're talking about the NBA and that climate. But people in general, did not trust having something that was seemed very experimental. But I think now, the numbers are different. And I also think that the news narrative that it was people of color that weren't taking the vaccine was very skewed because it's really,
Yeah.
middle America, certain states that have certain political affiliations aren't taking the vaccine. So people were making it seem like, we were being villainized around not wanting to help, create this community of safe health, for everyone. In reality, it wasn't that, right? So it was so skewed.
Yeah. Again, that narrative was too easy. I remember fighting with a lot of people on, let's see
Yes.
some stats on that. That seems too easy to be blaming Black and Latino
Yes.
and underprivileged groups for not getting it. Wait till we see the
Absolutely.
numbers on it. I'd be remiss not to talk about working in politics and with Obama, especially connected to it. Just feels like with the NBA and the WNBA, the political empowerment and social movement that's happening there. Talk to me a little about politics, how you got involved with Obama, what that turned into, and maybe how that can relate to some of the NBA and WNBA players.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in LA. I was in the music industry and I had a recording studio in LA where I would bring in, kids that were in trouble in the community and have them, learn how to play the drums with Tony Royster or like learn how to write lyrics with Corrupt. And so we would do these different programs. And I got a phone call of someone that used to be Obama's roommate at Harvard and said, look, I know your sister. I know that you're really close with these different celebrities. And
Cool.
I think we're going to be struggling for the reelection. I think that a lot of people feel like they were slighted. A lot of influencers and athletes felt like they helped the president get elected in 2008 and then were forgot about. Obviously, my response is you don't get invited to the cookouts. Like, it's not like it's the White House. Like, you don't get to come over for a sleepover. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be mad that you haven't been over to the crib. Like, that does not make sense.
Yeah.
However,
He doesn't have people over for March Madness.
exactly. People were upset
Yeah.
that they weren't invited to watch the finals. So I think that narrative, people just assume Black president, it's about to be some house parties. We're all going to be kicking it. And so I got the phone call and like, we need to get trust back with entertainers. And,
Cool.
We know that you've got the trust of certain folks. And at that time, my studio we had Jay-Z and Rock Nation recorded all their first stuff there with Cole and Bridget Kelly and Rita Ora. And specifically, I think they wanted Jay and that crew, but they asked me would I be willing to move to Chicago and run their athlete celebrity strategy. And I said, hell yeah, Obama wants me to do what? Yes. So I like immediately moved to Chicago and I was able to do, over 500 events with people of influence with the president there for a
Amazing.
lot of them, taking him to 40/40 Club to, see Beyonce and Jay-Z and doing big rallies and concerts. And I created Athletes for Obama. So there were no entities like that, DJs for Obama. So I got D Nice and that crew who
Cool.
now does everything. And I'm like, you're at
Yeah,
every
yeah.
party. I'm at no parties. Like, come on, Dean, you're at all the parties. I literally just saw him in the vineyard. I'm like, you never invite me. And he's like, you put me on. I'm like, I know, but I never get invited to anything. So I love him. And so, being able to do cool things like that is how I got into it. But really, to me, the glaring thing that was beautiful about that experience is that it proved that people of influence, athletes, entertainers, those guys, they want to be helpful and they don't know what to do.
Yep.
So they needed people like me to come in and say, if you go to your hometown, we register voters. Alicia Keys, you did the diary of Alicia Keys. Let's do a diary of you on the campaign trail. So I went on the road with her and did
Cool.
a diary while she went, to Philly and all these different cities. So that was my job. So I was able to see that they wanted that. They needed someone to help guide them. And that is transitioned and translated beautifully to Kinship, because now that's, again, exactly what we do is we take personalized people and their situations and their interests. And if there's a policy you want to get changed, let's work on that. Like, let's talk about how you can get some bills passed, right? Like, let's figure out how to do that. Let's figure out how to do that collectively with you and your peers on top of that. So that's how it's translated. And you've seen the WNBA especially stand up and be willing to risk it all in so many different avenues that I think is really special. And I think we're going to be seeing more of that trickle down effect.
I love it. So I have two more questions, and thank you so much for the time. This has been great.
Yeah.
What does the next 12 months look like for the Kinship Advisors? If you can control your own destiny here, what does it look like?
Yeah, the next 12 months would be, getting more aligned clientele within sports entertainment. And as I say influencers in general, but people of power who want to make a difference. So it's really growing and expanding that base. It's bringing on some folks to help, manage what that looks like. Ideally, Kinship and Kinfolk Africa 2022 will be happening.
Cool.
So my plan for anyone who's listening and wants to join is to have all of these people get activated on the continent. And so I went to Africa, I went to Ghana for Year of Return. And what that did for me as a person of color, seeing the slave castles and seeing where we came from, is you can't tell me anything about my level of resilience. You can't tell me anything about my value. You can't tell me anything that I'm not a queen. You can't tell me anything coming out of that experience.
Yeah,
and a lot of times people don't have that experience. And I know that if I take people of color, if I take Black people, if I take, these artists and these athletes to the continent to see what I saw, you come back activated in a different
Absolutely.
way. You're able to do things that you're connected to your ancestry in a way that is so powerful and so special. For the next 12 months, I would have had Kinship and Kinfolk Africa. And again, like to activate that community. And I think there's also, I'm a coach, so I coach, the same people I'm talking about in social impact. I also coach them on their purpose and being better leaders and showing up differently. And so my coaching practice will be even larger because I want to have other coaches that are able to do the same thing. There's not a lot of minority coaches out there. And it takes special kind of coaching to coach, athletes, artists, entertainers. So
absolutely does, yeah.
So that's what we're doing. We're building connection, we're building community and expanding our business.
I love it so much. Thank you. Final question. Since you told me you went to the Usher show last night,
yeah.
What's your favorite Usher song out of all the ones you sang last night?
So my voice, as I mentioned, is like a little raspy because I sing every Usher song. But like, I think, it was a Confessions type of vibe. So
okay,
I just
cool.
love when he did Confessions. I sang really extra loud to that. If I felt connected to that. So I would say that for now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's a good one. Alexys Feaster, thank you so much. This is great. Have a great day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Changeup, produced by Elena Weedland, with original music by Rodney Hazard. If you liked what you heard, we'd appreciate your support by liking, sharing, leaving a comment, and subscribing wherever you listen. Thanks once again. Until next time.